Welcome into Extreme Radio, presented by GracePointe Healthcare. Modern medicine the old-fashioned way. Request your appointment online at GracePointeHealthcare.com. Mention you're from 8-Man Extreme, and you get $20 off your new patient office visit fee. Again, GracePointe Healthcare, modern medicine the old-fashioned way. Spencer Tomzett, Isaiah Austin. We got Wayne Weathers and James Shannon later on the show. We have an interview lined up potentially, but we've got a lot more to talk about, and that is the craziness that has happened in 8-man football this weekend. My goodness, what a weekend. It has been one of the more turnover weekends that we've seen, so far through the season. And we just got past week 3. We're going into week 4, and it's already been that crazy, Isaiah.
Yeah, all of our brackets have been busted so far.
If we had, like the NCAA March Madness, if we had brackets busted like that, or in college, as they call it, bracketology, if we had that kind of stuff busted already, everything's busted. Let's just start with the big game. Let's start first with Bowling Green Christian Academy hosted the Tennessee Heat, and the Heat came in and beat them by 10, 46-36. And I will admit, James called it on this one that the Heat was going to win, but he was telling us that he called it that he thought it wasn't an upset. It was an 0-1 team beating a 2-0 team going into that game. It was an upset for the Heat.
And the Heat had a really rough year last year, and Bowling Green coming in was seen as a top-tier team by all of us, highly respected in the league. And for them to go into Bowling Green and upset them by double digits is certainly an upset. It certainly is.
Yeah, to upset them by 46-36 is amazing, especially at home. It was a very tight game throughout, from what we heard. But Bowling Green, they do go into their bye week this week, going 2-1, and they face South Haven afterwards. The other game, of course, we got top to bottom here is, my goodness, the defending MTAC champion South Haven Christian School Patriots, their first game at home. Clean swept, blown out by the Webb School, 41-0. The lack of a better word to describe it, but 41-0. Nobody had any clue that this was going to happen. No one had any hopes for the Webb School to win.
I don't even think Webb did.
I don't know if they did either. Well, as a team, you always want to go in confident, but you just have no clue at all what's going on. Nobody had any clue why that result came from that game.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten my hands on the film, so I don't really know particularly what exactly happened. But it seems to me like South Haven just got completely outplayed by Webb, which is Webb's a boarding school. They don't start practice until a week or two ago, and South Haven's had a while to practice and get ready. This is shocking to me, especially after losing Kilpatrick at quarterback and Wright at receiver. They were down coming into this year, but it looks like they're right back where they left off, or even better.
Absolutely, and again, we thought that the Webb School was losing a good amount of their players going into this year, but it seems that even if they have lost some of their players, they've regained it and got a huge win. It doesn't matter for an in-division record, but a huge motivational factor to beat the defending MTAC champions going into the rest of the season. We'll get to our Extreme Game of the Week broadcast in a little bit, but we do have to cover the Riverside Knights got it done after only putting up 6 points against Christian Community last week. They managed to put up 32 on the FCS Knights to win against them 32-22 at Franklin Classical. And to see a huge, not necessarily a huge turnaround, because it was a close game. Well, actually, I would say it is a huge turnaround, because to go from losing 44-6 against Christian Community and to win by 10 against the FCS Knights the next week to get a win in the South, it's got to be pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it was good for them to play with one quarterback for the whole game and have a week to practice with him. I thought he played really well, but both teams coming into the game beaten up. We saw that both teams, it was a fun game to watch. Even though both teams were beaten up and not a lot of experience was on the field, it was still a fun game to watch, and both teams fought to the last whistle.
They fought very much so. And speaking of that, the Lancaster Christian Academy Knights new on the scene for 8-man football. Their first road 8-man football game, and against the Franklin Christian Academy Falcons, 56-12. And that's the sort of performance that was more improved than against the Heat, because the Heat, although the score, as we covered last week, was not necessarily reflective of the game itself. I mean, Lancaster's 2-0 now. And FCA is now 0 and they are now 0-2, and especially to get a loss at home in a game for the South. But at least from what you saw of the film, they stopped the running game of John Buchanan, and that's what led them to a victory.
Their defense was phenomenal. John Buchanan got one score the whole game, and then their other score came from a pass to Sonny Reed, who is a senior, a guy we didn't see a ton of last year, but has came out strong this year so far. Besides that, though, the Lancaster defense really held up Franklin Christian Academy big time. The game was, if I'm not incorrect, it was 38-6 at halftime. It was over halfway through this game. They just came in and took care of business.
And again, as I mentioned for you, it was simply they stopped the rushing game. They stopped Buchanan from getting to the outside, and that's a major factor for the Falcons that, you know, as we talked before the show, that's the one thing Lancaster did that hardly anybody was able to do in MTAC last year, which was stop the rushing game of Buchanan.
Yeah, and I think that comes from their 11-man background, which is an 8-man. It's hard to contain with the numbers, but guys coming from an 11-man background, they understand what it's going to take to reach the outside and stop the run from getting to the outside and players being able to get down the field by bouncing out. So I think those guys having experience in 11-man and the field being much, much smaller have that experience of being able to reach the outside.
Yeah, and we'll see definitely how Lancaster improves going through the season. They have a bye week this week before they have their next South game in Week 5 against Riverside Christian. And the final game we'll go over is the in-division game. Our extreme game of the week, which was an amazing sight to see, quite frankly. Not what we expected. I'm not sure if anybody else expected it, but the Sacred Heart of Jesus High School Knights got it done on the road in Antioch and beat the Lighthouse Christian School Lions 42-32. And the score was reflective of how the game was, because it was just back and forth. It was tied at 14 at the half. Both teams were keeping it close 100%. The rest of the games this week were all blowouts. Aside from Riverside FCS, there was a 10-point difference there. But the rest of the games were blowouts, and we managed to cover a really great one.
Yeah.
We saw good things on both sides of the ball. We saw that Sacred Heart was able to get a bunch in the end zone. We saw that Lighthouse has their star in Bond, their player number 7. But we saw a good amount of things in that game.
Yeah, so Sacred Heart really, really impressed me. Those guys had a really, really rough season last year. Didn't have the numbers expected turnout for this year, but they came out and played so hard against this Lighthouse team. On the flip side, I think that Lighthouse is better than what they showed. They had a backup quarterback in there that threw 5 picks. They got their senior quarterback returning in a week and a half. So they're gonna be okay. I think they have a very, very good chance of making the playoffs this year once they're completely healthy. But their running back Bund is phenomenal. I mean, double-digit tackles, over 200 rushing yards. This kid is he has a swagger like I haven't seen in the MTAC in a long time.
Yeah, and especially we heard a lot of different things from both the coaches, and last night especially. They got the job done, and for them to get a victory on the road against Lighthouse is big. What's even more big is next week they're facing off against South Haven, the defending MTAC champions, who just took a shutout loss to Webb. So it may be that Sacred Heart is poised to get that win, and potentially they might even get a bowl spot.
Yeah, and Sacred Heart playing South Haven. If South Haven really performs as poorly as we saw them last week, they could have a win there. Then after that, they play the Heat, who decent but not completely sold on them. They could get a win there. Might pick up the win at Riverside and FCS. So that you're looking at a 6 or 7 win season if they can come out with the same intensity that they did last Friday.
Absolutely, and we're looking again at South Haven and seeing how they're going to be able to how they're going to do going all the way down to Jackson. It's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. But again, you look at how the games went. We only had 2 games that were not blowouts. The rest of them complete blowouts. And you wonder if this is going to be how it is the rest of the season for 8-man football. But I'm excited to see how some of these teams face off against people who did commit those blowouts. Like, I'm excited to see how Webb potentially performs against Lancaster. I'm excited to see how teams like Lighthouse, how they potentially perform against, South Haven. These are going to be big games that we're going to see entirely. It's hard to think of.
Yeah, and I normally see at the MTAC as being in 3 tiers. You have the top tier teams who can play against anybody. And win and be able to compete against each other and have very, very hard-fought games. All 8 guys on both sides are talented athletes. You have the middle-tier teams that can pull some upsets, are going to beat the bottom-tier teams, compete within the level, bowl game teams, as you would call it. And you have the teams that just struggle to get wins at the bottom. I think now we're not seeing the power rankings or the order of the teams. We're seeing the tiers begin to form. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see where teams are going to end up at the end of the year, because right now I just see the tiers forming. I don't know about the 1, 2, 3 so far. It's hard to place that yet.
Yeah, the teams are starting to shape potentially what they're capable of, but it's going to depend on how they progress throughout the rest of the season. No ideas yet on who's going to be number 1, 2, and 3 seed in the North and South, but some of them are making good candidate races for that already in Week 3. We're trying to get Coach John Argus of St. Andrews Swanee to interview. Right now we're trying to get him configured and get him in. Hopefully we will have him connected soon, but we're going to go ahead and go to our segment Sound Off with Wayne Weathers, and he's got his stuff he's been looking at through at least some of the film that he's watched, as well as with with our game that we covered. So I'm going to hand it to Wayne Weathers.
All right. Thank you, Spencer. What the heck?
Hello. There you go. So much for sound off.
Yeah.
Sound off, literally.
All right. So, pretty good game this week. The outcome was not showing what the actual footage we saw. Lighthouse had a pretty good team with an amazing running back who has a high opportunity to get, if he gets more touches. He has a high opportunity to go Division I if he gets more touches. He had 12 carries for 258 yards, as well as 10 tackles and an interception. Only thing I would say, he needs to work on his ball security. He had 2 fumbles, one of which was completely unacceptable. Wouldn't you say, Isaiah?
Yeah, definitely. But I think it'll just come with time as the season goes on. He'll get more composed, and the team's errors will start to get to a minimum. So I think it's just a time deal with him.
Oh, yeah. And then Sacred Heart, I was extremely impressed with their team, having a first-year coach. Pretty good defense. 5 interceptions, great quarterback. They won their first 8-man football game after a winless season. Excited to see them play next week at home against South Haven. And that's it. You got any questions for me, Spencer?
Well, so you mentioned, with Lighthouse, they have 7 who's Bond. You mentioned before the game while we were down in the field, talking to the coaches, that you mentioned that he kind of has an NFL body. Mm-hmm. He has a kind of NFL build and such. From what you saw on Friday, is he NFL caliber already at this point?
I would say if he worked on his ball security and worked on his his attitude towards the game, kind of. He got a little bit cocky because, I mean, who wouldn't if they were just manhandling everybody? I mean, you'll see on the highlight film what we're talking about.
And let me add something. So that we don't get roasted here, you all are going to see that we are not over-exaggerating about this kid at all. And I'm sorry to FCA on Friday. You're going to have to learn the hard way. And all the teams for the rest of the year, you're going to see what this kid is capable of. We're not trying to overhype him in any way. We're just stating that this is one of the biggest kids in the MTAC in a long time, and he's a running back.
Mm-hmm. We talked to their coach prior to the game, and they just said he's a gym rat. Always in the gym. Coach even said he was one of his projects, is what he said. So, like,
I mean, he has to be 250 as a running back.
He has to be 6'4", 265, probably, I'd say, to be exact. Of pure muscle.
Big kid, yeah.
Pure muscle. I mean, this guy's built like a train.
Yeah, he definitely has the appearance of an NFL player already. But of course, you're right about ball security because he had 2 fumbles and some of them were not. They were not very pretty fumbles at all throughout the game. But definitely he has the ability to improve his craft. Now, in terms of Sacred Heart, because you said you're impressed with them to see how the season goes around. With Sacred Heart, the fact that they managed to have a close win against Lighthouse in the North, so that's one North win, which is going to be impactful for them in the playoff seeding later in the season. But they're also against South Haven next week, the defending MTAC champions. Was it just luck that Webb managed to win 41-0, or is it possibly reflective of South Haven's season?
I think that it's kind of like the old Mike Tyson quote. You have a game plan until you're punched in the face. You know?
That's a good quote to use in that.
So, like, I mean, South Haven just got punched in the face, basically, shut out by Webb, a team that we didn't even think was going to be, like, a contender. Now, I'm thinking they're a contender. They have a chance. I mean, after what I have seen in the score, I haven't seen the film yet because we haven't gotten any film yet on that game. But just by score and by what I've heard from James, it was a blowout completely. No doubt about it. And to shut out the state champions or the MTAC champions, whichever one you want to call it, is a huge feat and will be great for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll definitely see how South Haven and the rest of the teams perform throughout, and we're hoping that South Haven will be able to bounce back from their blowout against the Webb School. We'll just see how they perform later on this season. So that was Sound Off with Wayne Weathers. We're unable to get Coach Hargis into the Discord server. Looks like he's had some technical issues on his end. So for now, it looks like we are going to hand it to Mr. James Shannon for Skip the Sensitivity once again. All opinions not reflective of 8-Man Extreme, and all James's opinions. So James, we look at how the scores were this week, and we look at how a lot of upsets were pulled, a lot of different things. Does it shock you that there were only two games that were not blowouts this week?
The blowouts, and I'm guessing that you're referring to obviously the big one, but then the Lancaster. I really was not surprised by either one of those blowouts. The other games, I really didn't think they were going to be blowouts either. Every game this week played out about how I thought it would. Maybe not necessarily who won the game. I think I missed a couple picks, but the two games that were the one game that was a blowout. I don't think anybody expected Webb South Haven, but that was a crazy game. I was able to be there, and it was insane.
Now, obviously, I'm pretty sure everybody can agree with you. No one expected that people may have expected that there was a potential surprise from Webb South Haven, but nobody expected there was going to be a blowout by Webb. If you had said that preseason to any of us, nobody would agree. Everyone would think you were 100% crazy. I know that you were at least off the show that in our conversations you were all about Bowling Green. Bowling Green is not going to go 3-0. They're going to be shocked because once they face a North team. So just give how you were able to give that prediction on Bowling Green not winning against the Heat in confidence.
Well, here's how I got to that one is I looked at the 2 wins that Bowling Green had against your Franklin teams, and I also looked at the Heat Lancaster game. And for the Heat Lancaster game, it wasn't – you always have to look at a game one of two ways. It was either the fact that the Heat were really bad or that Lancaster was really good. And I thought it was the fact that Lancaster was really good. I think the Heat were a really good team. I think Lancaster was a better team, and so that's why they picked up the win. In terms of the Bowling Green situation, did they deserve to win the 2 Franklin games? Yes, absolutely. They have their game plan, though. In my opinion, they had a game plan. Wait out their opponent until the second half when they're low on numbers and when they're cramping and when they can't keep up. You hit their edge where they don't have speed, and there you go. They're going to take it to the house. They're going to outlast you. They're going to beat you up. That was their plan, and that was how they were going to be able to get it done. Now they've hit the Heat, who have depth, who have players. Last week against Lancaster, they didn't struggle with cramp. They had some cramping issues, but not on the level. Every time they had a cramping issue, they had a guy who could step up and take their place. The 2 Franklin teams didn't have that. In my opinion, they did not have that level of talent. And so when you looked at those 2 things combined, and also the fact that, in my opinion, the Heat this year, they're going to be like an old school Aaron Academy team. You might beat them, but I guarantee you, if you ask Lancaster after the game 2 weeks ago how they felt the next morning, it hurt, and they were in pain, and there were plenty of bruises. They're going to knock you on your butt. They're going to take you for a ride, and then you might beat them, but you're going to know you played them the next day. There's teams you can beat, and you're like, oh, let's go to the beach. Let's go do whatever. Let's go to the fair. This is not one of those teams. So when they beat you, you lost and you got whooped up on, and if you beat them, they're still going to whoop up on you. They're still going to know it. So based on those facts, that's why I predicted that, and obviously I was correct. And the game really was not as close as the score. At one point, it was 26-8, and Bowling Green was able to get back in the game, which that was due to, and I'll break this here, that was due to a big injury for the Heat. And I actually found out yesterday that James Redding is out for the season with a broken leg, and he broke it up there in Bowling Green, had to go to the hospital. He's out of the hospital now, but he is out for the season. So as soon as that happened, the players were still stepping up. But I think that contributed just a little bit, and Bowling Green was able to get back in the game. But anyways, there's a little breaking news there for you.
Yeah, James Redding, unfortunately, having a broken leg and thus out for the year with the Tennessee Heat. We do wish all the best for him. Maybe we can get him to run the ticket booth at the All-Star game like we had that one injured player do last year. I think it was Cole we had do that. Was it Cole, I think? Or was it Cole?
No, we had
Caden.
Caden helped with the broadcast. We had 2016 All-Star alum right. Jared Trahan and Hunter Meeks from Riverside Christian. They ran the ticket area for us.
That's right. It was Trahan. We're going to pause to skip the sensitivity portion because we did manage to get him in, and it's always great to have coaches on the show to give us some insight into the league and such, and especially ahead of their games. And we proudly have Coach John Hargis of St. Andrews Suwannee on the show. How's it going down in Suwannee there, Coach? Looks like we do have Coach in server, but he may have push-to-talk enabled instead of voice activity, so we'll get him up in just a moment. Let me see what. Just out of interest, let me see what the weather is going on like now in Suwannee. Just to see how what the conditions are and such. Hey, I mean it's a potential talking point if we get Coach Hargis on here. We'll see if we can get him back in here. Coach, you there? Yeah, it looks like Coach Hargis just having a few issues, but we'll definitely see how it gets configured later on. All right. Well, while we're waiting for Coach to get fully configured here, might have him this time, Coach. All right, looks like Coach Hargis is still having his technical issues and such. So let's see if we can get. We'll go ahead and continue. Skip the sensitivity for with James Shannon. Then, James, let me ask you this. So we look a little bit at. Obviously, you're going to give your prediction. You're going to give your predictions on the games of next week. But we have 3 teams on bye weeks going into week 4. We've got Bowling Green. We've got Lancaster, and we have the final bye week for Tennessee School for the Deaf. So, how important or how pivotal do you think it's going to be for Bowling Green and Lancaster to have their bye weeks at this time in the season?
These are really strategic bye weeks, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Lancaster, of course, coming off 2 big back-to-back wins, and this gives them a chance to they can go to the Riverside game because that's their next opponent after this bye week. So they can go to the Riverside game, and then or they can go to Classical, who they have yet to play, the Classical Web game on Thursday night. They can go catch that game, or they can go on. Well, of course, they've already played Franklin Christian, but they also have Lighthouse Christian coming up on the second week after their bye week. So the 2 teams that they play the next 2 weeks after bye, they can go scout them on back-to-back nights. So that's part of the pun, nights, on back-to-back games. That's what they can do with that setup. For Bowling Green, you're coming off of a loss. You've got a bye. You can go. You got South Haven after your bye. And to be honest, South Haven's making the trip to Jackson to play Sacred Heart. So potentially you could catch them off of back-to-back losses. But even if you don't, you're still catching them off a trip to Jackson where guys are – and I know it's a whole week, but I think the travel, it still affects you. And I think if you don't treat it right, it can still carry over. So in terms of that, even if they don't catch them on back-to-back losses – they might be able to catch them off guard a little bit. And for Bowling Green, too, if they wanted to go to the Lighthouse Franklin Christian game, they can scout that game on Thursday night. If they wanted to go to maybe Franklin Classical and Webb or something to that effect, they could go to the Riverside Swanee. I know they have both of those teams on their schedule. And, of course, both teams and everyone could go Saturday and see CCS at the Tennessee Heat. And that's a big matchup, and we'll talk about it later on, but I really, really like that game. I wish I could be there for it. I'll be out of town, but, these are really strategic bye weeks that were placed, and I like where both of them are happening.
Yeah, well, definitely those bye weeks potentially strategic on the coach's part, and we'll see how it benefits them through the latter of the season. So, if you got your helmet schedules out, go from top to bottom for the game predictions with Isaiah and James. So here we go. As we said, Bowling Green Christian Academy is on a bye week. They're the only team in the North that's off this week, so they will get a chance to rest. South Haven Christian School travels all the way down to Jackson to face off against the Sacred Heart of Jesus High School Knights. Now, Isaiah, we look at this game, and obviously Webb blowing out South Haven, and Sacred Heart is off of that high going up from a road win against Lighthouse. So it's going to be an interesting matchup down in Jackson.
Yeah, and it's tough for me to call this one because I haven't had an opportunity to see the Webb South Haven game, but just knowing where South Haven was last year, and I know Sacred Heart came out with a big win last Friday, but I just feel like I have to give it to South Haven because they just haven't proven. They had one bad game, one awful game, I add, but I don't think it's enough to count them out against a team that is one game back into the league. So I'm taking South Haven.
All right, James?
Guys, on this one, I like one of two things. I'm going to stick with my preseason predictions because I don't want to flake just because of results week to week. I know that they're coming off, Sacred Heart's coming off a win. I know South Haven is coming off a loss. I've got South Haven to pick on this one. And I think every week you got to pick an upset. This is my upset to pick this week. If South Haven, who didn't have anyone get injured Friday night, to my knowledge, so if South Haven can get it together and they can figure out the mistakes they made from Webb. Here's the thing about Friday night's game against Webb. Those coaches and those players had not gotten smacked and knocked upside the head like that all year last year. They got beat by CCS, but that was more of they were doing something wrong. They were giving up onside kick touchdowns, which shouldn't have been happening. But this is their first time that they've really been just hit upside the head. Coach Zimmerman, this was only his second year, so they've really been able to get on this. I don't know how Sacred Heart will respond to coming off a win on Friday night. So all that being said, I'm picking South Haven for this one. I had them picked to 6-1 for the season, so now they have to win out to make sure my prediction is correct.
Yeah, we'll see if that comes true as they travel down to Jackson this Friday. There is a Saturday game this week that between the Tennessee Heat is hosting the defending national champion Christian Community Colts. And Isaiah, what we've seen from Christian Community in that game against Riverside, we see that they still have firepower. They still have good coaching power. They see exactly what they have. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Tennessee Heat will fare, especially because they got their loss against Lancaster, and then they got their win against Bowling Green, who was an undefeated team to that point. So it is going to be an interesting battle to see how that goes. And the Christian Community Colts are technically 2-0 because of that forfeit against Sacred Heart, but they're officially 1-0 because of that victory against Riverside. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Tennessee Heat fares hosting Christian Community.
Yeah, and as you were saying, the forfeit week 1, I actually would have really liked to watch that game because that probably would have been a pretty good game. But yeah, I'm taking CCS on this one, especially before the injury to Reading happened. I would have been a toss up for me, but because CCS is just so strong and Reading is out this week and for the rest of the season. I'm going to have to give it to CCS on this one. I think they're just way too strong right now.
All right, James?
Guys, cannot call me a homer. Listen, I have declared how much I like the Heat. I have talked about how much I like the Heat. I hate that they lost James Redding, but I think that Preston Sloan, who had 3 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown the other night, or maybe I have those stats backwards. I know he had 3 or 4 touchdowns the other night. I think he's going to step up just another notch. Micah DeGroot is solid in several points, and their quarterback and wide receiver connection, the Goolsby brothers. I like the younger brother at quarterback. I like the older brother at receiver. I think they're going to take it up a notch. They're going to challenge CCS. I don't think anything you saw in the jamboree between Heat and CCS, I don't think you can take any of that into account. I think it's a whole new ball game. It's a whole new day. And to be honest, I've got the Heat picked on this one.
Interesting pick on that against the defending national champions. Really interesting pick on that one. So you got a torn opinion on that. Is CCS for Isaiah?
I think that might be the biggest left field pick from James this entire season.
It might very well be. We'll see how it plays out.
I'm taking the Browns over the Patriots this season.
Oh man, that would be a miracle. That would be a miracle story if the Browns ended up winning the Super Bowl this year, especially going on a 1-31 record.
No, because they're going to go 4-0 in the preseason, so that automatically means they're going 0-16.
Right. But on topic with 8-man football, Lighthouse Christian School, they host Franklin Christian Academy, so they have 2 home games. They actually have 3 home games in a row because the week after they'll be hosting the Tennessee Heat. But they host Franklin Christian Academy. Anytime those guys face off, they always have a very decent bout. The big thing especially is that with Lighthouse, they just lost by 10 They're angry. They're looking for a win. Franklin Christian just got blown out by Lancaster. They're angry. They're looking for a win. So it's going to be a high-stakes game out in Antioch for sure. It's really hard to determine who's going to win that one.
Yeah, well, both teams have great running backs. Lighthouses, we really weren't aware of until this past week, but he's phenomenal. I think where the main difference in this game is going to be is that the line situation. You have a minimal line with FCA, one of the smallest, most inexperienced lines in the MTAC against, the line that Lighthouse always puts out. They always have big boys, guys who know what they're doing. Got 3 inside the 5-yard line stops against Sacred Heart last week. So I'm picking Lighthouse on this one. I think it's going to be very, very, very high scoring. I even think it might be even more high scoring than the Bowling Green game.
So you got Lighthouse. What do you got, James?
Isaiah, I'm either going to either look like a genius or I'm going to look like a complete idiot. Listen, again, I'm sticking with preseason predictions. I'm picking the upset. I've got FCA topping Lighthouse. And there's one name that I'm going to throw out there. John Buchanan. Mic drop. There you go.
He's going to stick with John Buchanan on that one. You're shocked, aren't you, Isaiah?
I am beyond shocked.
He's right about that.
I think the Lighthouse gets the second seed.
I'll tell you, he's going to come off this Lancaster game where they shut him down like no other team has ever shut him down. I'm not going to go into all the statistics. I gave it to y'all before the game. That was the first time that he's been shut down when he is the running back. I think he's going to come into this game with Lighthouse PO'd, and I think he's going to be ready to go, raring to go, and he's going to get it up and running.
So who wins in the running back battle, Bond or Buchanan?
I know y'all are sold on Bond, and maybe it's because y'all saw him and I haven't seen him. That's fine. I'm not sold on him yet until I see him. And until I see him, I'm going to stick with the guy I have seen, and that's 2-1.
Well, let's we'll see if your predictions are right or not on that. I mean,
they're not.
It's in yours, but you think they're not right. So let's see. Yeah, we already covered Sacred Heart, already covered Heat. So now we head down to the south. There's a Thursday night game. Riverside Christian Academy is hosting St. Andrews Swanee down in Fayetteville, and hopefully we may be able to get Coach Argus on here to get an interview after our predictions because he's still trying to get connected in. But we don't know exactly what Swanee has. They've had 3 – I think this was their first week of practice. Maybe last week was their first week of practice. So we don't know what to expect. With Riverside, however, they're off of a 10-point win against FCS and a loss, almost a blowout. Actually, you could consider it a blowout against Christian Community. So Riverside especially, they have their quarterback in the game. They have Crutcher Rizal back after the ejection. So he's in. And against Swanee, who we know they have Jalen Tillman back, but we don't know all of the capabilities that they have. So it's going to be interesting to see how Riverside hosts Swanee.
I'm saying, yeah, Swanee right. Sorry, that's the slogan for the college.
Oh, okay. You're going with the college stuff. Okay.
No, I'm taking Swanee absolutely in this game. Swanee, they did lose some pieces. They did lose some seniors, losing the quarterback, losing one of the running backs, But Jalen Tillman, that's the name that rings in your mind. And the style of offense they play with the line that's returning and the firepower that they still have on the offensive and defensive lines, I don't think there's any way of stopping that type of offense. On the flip side, I don't think Riverside is in any position to beat a team of that size. I think all their wins are going to come against struggling teams this year. Might pull 1 or 2 upsets. We'll see what happens with Riverside. Very beat up, but I think Swanee, without a doubt, is going to pull this one out.
All right, James, what you got?
All right. Again, preseason predictions. I'm taking Riverside. I'll tell you why. I want to know who on Swanee's team, and maybe Coach Hargis can answer this. Who on Swanee's team has the speed to keep up with John Chorian? Because he burned Classical several times this last week.
Number 1, what's his name? He played quarterback?
The freshman quarterback, Jake Rubelski. I like the fact that he was able to – I like the fact that they settled on a quarterback. They're on their third quarterback, but I like the fact that they settled on a quarterback. I think another freshman, Michael Black, has stepped up. He was able to have an interception return for a touchdown. That's his second game in a row with a big play. He had the big touchdown catch against CCS. I think their young talent is going to step up. I think you're going to have Riley Hall, who, in some people's opinion, could be, I'm not saying this, could be one of the more, roughest players in the league. I'm not going to say dirty. I'm going to say roughest, one of the most hard-nosed players in the league. I think if he can get on another level, and John Knotts is a guy who's good on defense too, Jonathan Knotts. At center, he needs to get the snaps up. They were terrible with their snaps last week, and if they can't get that fixed, Jalen Tillman and company is going to rip them a new one in terms of just taking them to town. But if they can get that fixed, if Jonathan Knotts can step up and their freshmen can keep doing what they've been doing, I'm going to take Riverside on this one.
Isaiah, you were cringing a little bit when he announced his prediction. You got something you want to say?
The prediction line, it keeps going further and further. I mean, I understand he's trying to say strong too. I understand the strategy that he's doing. He's sticking strong to his preseason predictions because we don't have a lot to work off of here. We haven't seen Swanee play. We've seen Riverside against a great team and a struggling team, not sure what they're capable of compared to Swanee. So as much as I disagree completely with what he's saying, I still respect the fact that he's not looking too much into this right now because he's going with his preseason predictions because at the end of the day, we don't know anything yet.
No, we don't know.
We really don't.
No.
We know stats. We know who's playing well, but we don't know how. We have no idea on earth how this is going to end.
Of course not. So we
know what Riverside has. So in that regard, I'm taking the pick of what I know, and I'm taking the pick of the team coming off a win, not a team coming off of 2 weeks of practice.
That's true.
Okay.
That's true.
Yeah, you make a valid point with that. As we have another Thursday night game that's going on. It's between the Webb School and Franklin Classical School in Franklin. So Classical had a 10-point loss to Riverside. They had a loss to Bowling Green. So Classical right now is they are 0-2. They're looking for their first win in the South against Webb. And with Webb blowing out South Haven, one could say that it leans towards Webb in this for blowing out the defending national champions. But then again, we don't know what South Haven we haven't seen in person what South Haven has aside from James, of course. But with FCS, they might have the strength to be able to pull an upset on Webb.
I'm gonna say that it's gonna be till week 7 until they get their first South win. I don't think that they have the firepower to stop Webb, especially having played Friday, are completely beaten up, and only have 6 days of recovery to get minimal guys out there to play this game. I mean, this is a team that 2 weeks ago had to call a game against Bowling Green because they were down to 7 people. They've had a couple guys come back. Guys are getting healthier, but you just have those lingering injuries, and I think it's really going to affect them against a blazing hot Webb team. So I'm taking Webb.
All right, James.
Well, we actually have one game that we agree on the prediction. I'm also taking Webb over Classical, not just because it's my preseason pick, but because I saw them Friday night. Man, they are dominant. Brandon Azar is a guy who played last year and was accused of taking plays off. He's just gotten bigger and faster and stronger on the line at nose tackle. Shamar Frey is still a superstar. Onade is still going to give him their running back. Niall Archer is a guy. Keep an eye out for him. He's a big 6'2" wide receiver. He's going to give him an outside threat. And then they've got a freshman quarterback. I believe his name is Avante Harris, one of the two. And like I said, he's a freshman, but he was dropping some dimes the other night to guys at 2 touchdown passes. And I really, really like what he has. I think that South Haven has a good 1-2 punch with Manny Dang and Frankie Gagliano. And I think that if Webb can shut down the 1-2 punch of Dickerson and Salstrom, who were fantastic Friday night, fantastic. But I think that if they can shut down that 1-2 punch, they're done, especially if they can get to the quarterback like they got to Crawley Friday night.
Yeah, now, Yeah, so both of you guys at least agree on something. You got Webb getting in that one. Isaiah, you had something?
Yeah, I think Shamar Frey was probably the most underrated player in the MTAC last year. I feel like he had I think he got over 1,000 yards receiving last year, and it went unnoticed because of how well Jake Wright played. And he kind of was in Jake Wright's shadow, even though they shared the load offensively. So I think this is going to be an opportunity for Shamar Frey to take off as the guy at receiver and really have an incredible season, even better than last year.
Indeed. So those are all the games for this week. We're going to try to get Hargis in for an interview one more time, and if he is unavailable, then we'll announce our broadcast. I guess with Coach Hargis, I'm guessing he is unavailable. Coach, you there? It looks like unfortunately not. It's a shame Coach Hargis did try. We were trying to get him on for an interview. Unfortunately, unable to get in before we announce our game broadcast. Isaiah, you got one?
And one last thing about the Webb Franklin Classical game. Franklin Classical has a roster of 14 completely healthy, and right now coming into next week it's going to be 13. But the Webb school's got 27. They got guys that can reload, and then reload again, and then kind of like half reload. But, like 3.5 units. The guys don't have to play both ways. They're going to be fresh.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that game is, especially with Webb having so many numbers. That might be a potential of a really good matchup on Friday. So, our extreme games of the week. This is one of 2 weekends this year. Pretty sure it's one or two, or maybe the only one, where we have a triple header. We did have to change around our Friday game because there's something on the helmet schedule that said it was a Friday game for one of the games. But our broadcast schedule, Thursday, we will be in Fayetteville for Riverside Christian Academy hosting St. Andrew Sewanee, the Knights hosting the Mountain Lions at Knights Stadium. That's going to be a good game. James and I will be on call for that one. Friday night, we will be making the good travel, the farthest travel of any team in MTAC, out to Jackson, Tennessee. The Sacred Heart of Jesus High School Knights hosting the South Haven Christian School Patriots, the defending MTAC champions, facing off against the miracle upset on the road last week that we covered. So we'll be following the Knights back to Jackson next on this Friday. And Saturday, we will be live in Mount Juliet, the Tennessee Heat hosting the Christian Community School Colts. Triple header. Isaiah and I will be on call for Friday and Saturday night. James and I will be on call for Thursday night. So it's going to be a fantastic weekend for 8-man football. 3 games in a row. We're ready to see every action of it. And, of course, Thursday night we'll have Isaiah giving us scoring updates from Webb FCS. So we'll be getting those updates as well. And Friday, James will be at which I think he'll be at the only other game that's going on. James, you said you were going out of town, weren't you? You're not going to be at FCA Lighthouse.
Yeah, boys, I've actually got to go out of town for family business in North Carolina, so I will not be able to be at any, but I will be watching y'all's game Friday and Saturday, as well as watching the best team in the nation kick off their season Saturday night in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hey, UCF plays on Thursday.
No, sir. I am talking about Go Big Orange.
Oh, boy. Oh, goodness. Oh, just because they have a new coach doesn't mean that they're the best team in the nation.
Is that Rocky Top I hear playing?
Oh, my gosh.
I think it's number one on one top 25 poll. So
see, we already.
I think in the Bible it talks about what the gate of heaven looks like, but I'm pretty sure that by now it's been painted orange and white checker.
Come on.
Wow.
Come on.
I'm surprised we're talking about – first we talked about the NFL with the Browns winning the Super Bowl. Now we're talking about college football.
The gates of heaven being painted with the checkers.
Oh, my gosh. Checkered flag, here I come. But so that's our schedule for this weekend. We're in Fayetteville for Riverside versus Sewanee. Friday night, Sacred Heart hosting South Haven, and Saturday the Tennessee Heat hosting the Christian Community School Colts. So we will be live for all 3 of those games this weekend. AllKingdom.com extreme games of the week. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll basically wrap up Extreme Radio here. We thought we could get Coach Hargis in for an interview. He's just having technical issues on his side. We'll probably get him later in the season if we can get those worked out. But that'll end Extreme Radio for this week. Once again, it is presented by GracePointe Healthcare. Go to GracePointeHealthcare.com. Request your appointment online. If you mention you're from 8-Man Extreme, you get $20 off your new patient office visit fee. GracePointe Healthcare, modern medicine the old-fashioned way. On behalf of Isaiah Austin, Wayne Weathers, and James Shannon, thank you for tuning into Extreme Radio this week, and we will see you on Thursday for the Riverside Knights against the Swanee Mountain Lions.
See ya!